Well, there certainly are secular and religious views on what the correct moral standards are like. And maybe we can come back to that in a minute. But at the least, I wanted to point out or suggest that if people think that they can be mistaken, that seems to suggest that there's a real mark, so to speak, that they're not hitting or that they're missing.
Right.
So to take perhaps a simple example, suppose we're in a society where there's slavery, and then by some miracle, everybody wakes up one day and says, "Why do we have slavery? I mean, how are these people really all that different from us?"
Right.
And we shouldn't be slaves. Slavery would be bad for us. Well, they're kind of just like us in all relevant ways, so it's bad for them too. And we think, what were we thinking?
Right.
Well, I don't know, but I'm glad we figured it out.
Right.
People in that society are going to think, hey, today's society took a turn for the better. Today we realized that slavery was wrong. Yesterday we thought, oh, there's nothing wrong with slavery. And they're going to think that their improved society is improved because now it's closer to being in line to how things really should be.
Right.
So, and if you think that there's a way things really should be, that suggests there's sort of an objective, universal morality.
Right.
And, we think about what some other societies do, and we think that some things that they do not conform to that universal objective morality. One example would be, say, female genital mutilation.
Right.
Since we're online, I could encourage people to Google that topic or go to YouTube, and you'd find a lot of disturbing videos about that practice.
Right.
And, many people in our society, most people in our society would be appalled by that, and I think that they would have very good reasons for being appalled by that. And interestingly, people have tried to identify, well, what reasons do they give in societies where that's practiced in favor of that practice? And people have used the kind of logical concepts or skills that I present in this little paper, and they've run those reasons, analyzed those reasons to try to figure out, well, are those really good reasons to think that harming women and girls in these ways is okay? And, I do this in class.
Right.
We just sort of set things up in various logical forms and look at the arguments and try to figure out whether they're sound or not. I'm kind of forgetting where we're all going with this. So it seems like many people will think that there are some universal moral standards.
Right.
And I guess to go back to the torture example, here could be, somebody could propose something like this. Well, look, it's just always... You want to ask your question about torture again?
Sure. My thought is that there was a recent national debate, which was never really satisfactorily concluded, I don't think, about whether torture is morally acceptable if the end justifies the means. We saved 5,000 people in this building because we tortured the information out of this gentleman. If that's the case, and there are people who legitimately feel that it's acceptable, then why can't that be extended? We've now sort of degraded one aspect of humanity, what we can do to a human being. So why can't we then extend that to the animal experimentation and say to torture experiment on an animal if we believe that it is going to save lives out here is morally acceptable? Why can't we make that transition? And would it be valid for somebody to do that if they feel that torture is acceptable under certain circumstances?
Right. That's an interesting comparison. One thing about the torture debate is that people might say, or might ask, would torture be okay if X amount of people were saved by doing it? Part of what makes that difficult is that you never really know whether these people will be saved by this torture. And of course, people argue, well, actually more people might be harmed if somebody's tortured. And why is that? Because they think, well, other societies, if we are torturing their citizens, they're going to get upset, and then they're going to try to kill more people than they would have killed. So that will kind of backfire, and also people think about, well, what sort of message does this send? And suggest that the message sent that if we torture, well, that says something, and that's going to result in more torture overall. So a challenging thing about practical ethics is that it's often very hard to tell what's going to happen in the real world if you do something. I mean, especially with a big, huge issue like that. So it's possible that somebody could say that, yeah, I actually think that if, by torturing somebody, you could get information to save a bunch of other people, and you could know this for certain, if that were the situation, then yeah, I would be in favor of torture, provided there was no other way to get this information, and the other ways wouldn't yield better information, and so on and so forth. So they could say, in theory, sure, I agree with you. But there's just so much that we don't know, we can't predict, and given all that, there's a lot of risk to torture. Yeah, it might save people, but it might make things a whole lot worse. So, they might argue that given the uncertainty and the risk, the fact that, you don't know if torturing somebody's going to save whatever, many people. And, I mean, you do know, however, that if people are tortured, that certainly does not make us look good, so to speak. And so then I guess you're back to sort of wondering, given that uncertainty, what's the sort of safest thing to do? And then, of course, there's going to be more debates about that. But it seems like this is another topic where, for most people, there is so much information that they don't have and couldn't have, that it's pretty hard to think about. I mean, especially if you I guess especially if you are like most people and you sort of deny or you don't accept a super absolutist position. I mean, to switch from torture, say, to war. I mean, there are a lot of people who call themselves pacifists, but, well, what if there was these totally innocent country and was being attacked by these really bad guys? For many people who call themselves pacifists, they're going to they'll eventually have some sort of exceptions for, they're brutally murdering all these citizens who are the nicest people ever in the history of the human race, and they're so bad and they're utterly defenseless. Eventually it might become, and the only way we can protect them is by, going to war. And, somehow we're certain that nothing bad will happen to the good guys, and it'll just be the bad guys who get, their aggression will be ended. I mean, the real world, again, isn't often the simple.
Right.
Usually is not the simple, but if you come up with a scenario, even most people who call themselves pacifists are going to say that would be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I recognize that asking you this question, I don't want to be unfair about asking you about another philosopher. So if you don't want to comment on this, that's fine.
I can try.
Princeton philosopher Peter Singer, who is often known for several controversial stands, is
Right.
also an animal rights, or not animal rights, but against animal experimentation. This was not a recent, but November 2006 interview he had with the BBC. Let me just read a little bit. Singer is seen in conversation with Dr. Tipu Aziz, an Oxford neurosurgeon specializing in Parkinson. Aziz explains to Singer that 40,000 people have to date been made better through a treatment developed by means of experimentation on monkeys. About 100 monkeys worldwide have had Parkinson's induced to them for research purposes. Singer replies, "I do not think you should reproach yourself for doing it, provided that there was no other way of discovering this knowledge. I could see this as justifiable research." So if you'd care to comment on that, do you feel that's a legitimate comment, or is he being a little sloppy in his in his philosophical rigor when he sort of allows that for that exception, or could you comment on that?